My money's gone from my wallet. I just withdrew it yesterday. What's going on?
With a pale face, my husband, Kyle, shook me awake early in the morning, shoving his wallet in my face. As he said, the bill compartment was completely empty. Lately, we've been dealing with a strange situation where money keeps disappearing from our wallets. Even if we stash it in the safe or hide it in a drawer, it vanishes by the next morning. We're facing this problem where our living expenses keep dwindling little by little. Why does our money keep disappearing, even when he keeps his wallet on him at all time? It was something I didn't want to think about, but I began to wonder if a thief had been sneaking in every night. Our house is a standalone rental, not new by any means. With old locks and windows, someone with the right skills could probably get in without much trouble. Given this pace, I'm too anxious to sleep at night. We decided to come up with a plan after talking it over. It was his idea. He convinced me by saying,
I worry if something happened to you.
and I agreed. Seeing how relieved he looked, he seemed truly at ease. However, I never imagined this plan would lead to such a situation.
It's a bit pricey, but if it brings us peace of mind, it's worth it, right?
My name's Mina. I'm 37. After I graduated from college, I sat for the civil service examination and succeeded in my initial attempt. It was a difficult exam, but I got through it due to my persistence. I was placed in a federal service office, where I've built over a decade of experience. I was progressing steadily in my career and had even started to mentor reliable junior colleagues. I got married a few years after my assignment. Kyle is 3 years older than me. At that time, Kyle was aiming to become a civil servant like me. We met through a mutual friend who said we clicked instantly, which led us to start dating. Shortly thereafter, we married and resided in a quaint rental home I discovered. Despite his hard work, Kyle kept failing from the civil service exams. As he aged, he ultimately accepted a position at a private IT firm. He often talked about how unlucky he felt, maybe because it wasn't the job he truly wanted. He often appeared distressed from his work, and when I inquired, he would begin to vent.
So now, I have to work as in, say, at a client's office. But I told my boss I didn't want any assignments out there. But he ignores that and keeps ordering me around.
It seemed like Kyle was having a rough time at the client's site, being treated coldly and constantly having to do overtime because of sudden project changes. It was painful for me to see him so worn out. I tried to make elaborate dinners so he'd feel more comfortable at home, but he didn't seem to notice.
I know it's tough. Is the problem that it's not the work you wanted? Wouldn't it help to switch departments or join another team, if that's even possible?
There's no way that'll happen. At first, I thought I could just tough it out, but maybe I'm just not cut out for private sector work. This isn't the kind of job I wanted, and starting over again feels like a pain.
I wanted to find a solution, but I was beginning to realize that nothing I suggested would make a difference to him. He mentioned that he had no plans to work in the private sector, but isn't the nature of work similar, whether it's in government or private industry? The main issue was that his job wasn't what he wanted to be doing. If he could feel motivated by a new company, then maybe changing jobs was worth it. Given the current situation, it seemed that Kyle would continue to trudge through his work without making any changes. However, one day, my hopeful assumptions suddenly crumbled. Kyle's frustrations finally boiled over, and he ended up clashing with his boss, saying he was going to quit. Although I was stunned, I gently asked him, trying not to provoke him.
Quitting? Why did it come to that so suddenly?
I'm at my limit. I can't keep clashing with my boss. I can't take it anymore. No matter what I say, nobody understands, and no one has my back. I can't keep working there.
But quitting like this. What about your next job or your future plans? Have you thought about any of that?
When I asked, Kyle frowned and glared at me.
How am I supposed to think about that? I'm drowning in stress and working constantly. Unlike you in government work, I'm surrounded by idiots. I can't keep doing this. Or are you saying I should keep going until it breaks me?
Overwhelmed by his intensity, I realized that trying to discuss things wasn't going to help. Kyle's company had arranged multiple meetings with his boss, but all of his requests were denied. I had a feeling probably he was making some unreasonable demands. It wasn't hard to imagine that he wouldn't get along with his boss. In the end, Kyle quickly decided to quit, saying he couldn't stay in a company like that. Since I'd been listening to his complaints all along, I couldn't strongly object, so I encouraged him.
Take your time to rest, and let's restart fresh.
With him looking for another job and spending more time at home, we decided to split the household chores. While I worked, he'd handle things like cleaning and laundry. Kyle was able to live modestly while receiving unemployment benefits. However, I started noticing that more and more days would go by when the chores weren't done when I came home. Of course, I wasn't being harsh about it. However, when I saw the washing machine left on with damp clothes and the breakfast dishes untouched, I couldn't ignore it anymore. I decided to confront him a bit more firmly. Though he looked annoyed, he reluctantly started explaining.
I've been going out. I have to go out to apply for jobs to keep getting unemployment benefits, so I don't really have a choice.
That's true, but if you're going out, you could at least tell me. I can handle cleaning up if you let me know.
Kyle was vague about his destination. A few weeks passed with him keeping things unclear. One day, while I was near the closest shopping mall, I spotted him driving down the street. I was about to call out, but he didn't notice me and kept walking. Then, as if drawn in, he entered a nearby casino. I was so shocked I couldn't even speak. I knew he wasn't job hunting and he had been hiding something, but I never imagined he was going to a casino. That night, when I mentioned what I'd seen him, Kyle started making excuses with a panicked look.
An old friend insisted on taking me there. I couldn't say no.
But you were alone today, weren't you? And who exactly is this friend? Someone you can't introduce me to?
If someone was influencing him badly, I wanted to find a way to put a stop to it. Of course, such friend didn't exist. He was just making things up. When I tried to urge him to at least stop wasting money, he snapped back.
I'm just worried about how we're gonna get by until you find another job. So I'm asking you to cut back on unnecessary spending. And unemployment benefits aren't meant to be used like that.
Can't you let me have a bit of freedom? Waiting at home for you every day is driving me insane. I'm about to lose it. If you can't understand, then fine. I'm not working to meet your expectations. Can I live freely just a little?
My apprehensions about the future were in direct conflict with his perspectives.
I'm done with feeling tied down. I don't care if you don't understand me. There's nothing left to say.
Expressing his frustration over his lack of freedom, Kyle stormed out of the house. It was the biggest argument we'd had since getting married, and I was left standing there, stunned and helpless. I figured there was no other way. He wasn't used to chores, and sometimes he just didn't have enough time. He stopped sneaking out while I was at work and began openly leaving and returning late at night. He rarely came home, spending his time at the casino daily, weekends included. This behavior soon caught the attention of his parents. They were more inclined to take my side. They scolded Kyle for his reckless spending and urged him to find a new job, but he wouldn't listen, and our relationship continued to grow colder. After a while, strange things began happening around me. I'd open my wallet to find bills missing. Since I mostly used credit cards, I'd withdraw cash only for places that didn't take cards. Little by little, the cash seemed to be disappearing. If it was only $10, I might have thought I'd just forgotten I spent it. However, a few days after withdrawing a few $100s, I'd find it completely gone. That's when I became certain. Someone was taking money from my wallet. Suspicious, I started putting my wallet in the safe before bed, locking it in a drawer, or keeping it with me at all times. Yet each morning, the money would still disappear. One morning, as I was puzzling over this, Kyle showed up after a long absence, saying he'd noticed something strange too.
Money's disappearing from my wallet. Obviously, I haven't spent it. I just withdrew it last night. Mina, do you know anything about this?
Saying this, Kyle opened his wallet to show me.
I haven't touched it either. I didn't even know you came home last night.
But the money's definitely gone from my wallet. What's going on?
Kyle tilted his head, then suggested.
Could it be a thief? Maybe someone's sneaking in every night. I mean, our place is a rental, and it's not exactly new. Someone could have made a spare key, and the sliding door to the living room looks easy enough to pick, don't you think?
True, this has never happened before. Maybe we should take some precautions.
When I agreed, Kyle immediately proposed.
Let's set up security cameras. Just the thought of a thief terrifies me. If we record everything, then even if something happens while you're asleep, we'll have proof. If we need to, we can show it to the police. Wouldn't that put us both at ease?
Yeah, maybe you're right. It seems a bit pricey, but if it gives us peace of mind, it's worth it.
When I replied, Kyle looked relieved and happy. He has always been easily scared. He's hated horror movies and pranks ever since I've known him, so much so that he'd even jump at scary scenes on TV. I was feeling uneasy myself, so the idea of a small security camera didn't sound bad. Our living room has a large sliding door that opens to the yard. If anyone wanted to sneak in without us noticing, that was the only entry point that made sense. We also kept a small safe in the living room. We set up the camera where it could clearly capture the safe, hiding it behind a piece of furniture. If a thief broke in, it would be recorded. With this in mind, Kyle and I put our wallets in the safe, planning to catch the culprit in the act. A few nights later, in the middle of the night, our home echoed with a loud scream. It was such a sudden, loud noise that I shot up from a deep sleep. I jumped out of bed and rushed to the room where the scream came from. When I saw the scene, I couldn't help but burst into uncontrollable laughter.
A ghost!
There was Kyle, completely paralyzed with fear. It turned out he was the one taking money from my wallet after all. Although I'd suspected as much, this wasn't just a prank. According to him, he'd started by just taking one or two $10 bills. In time, he lost control and eventually, he ended up taking hundreds at a time. Realizing he'd taken too much to hide, Kyle panicked and tried to throw me off by claiming,
Someone's stealing from me too. It might be a thief.
he had even dressed all in black and left recordings of himself pretending to steal from the safe. However, he tried to adjust the camera angle to start his serious theft, and that's when things went wrong. You see, I had secretly modified the camera. Adjusting the angle would activate a sensor, setting off a loud, frightening noise. In addition, I attached a plastic white mask behind the camera. With its eerie glow, this was perfect for spooking Kyle, who's so easily frightened. In the pitch-black living room, with the booming noise and the mask's blank face glowing, he let out a terrified scream and fell to the floor. While he sat there, unable to stand, I calmly hit a switch to silence the noise and turn off the mask's light.
It's not a ghost. It's our theft deterrent. But it only works for people who know where the camera is.
Turning on the living room light, I explained the setup to Kyle, who turned red and yelled,
This isn't funny. You're a coward.
I didn't flinch and stood firmly in front of the safe.
Who's the one playing games here? You're the one sneaking money out of the safe and lying about a thief. That's pretty low.
Kyle, who had been secretly taking money from me and even made up a story about a potential thief. He couldn't give me a clear answer when I demanded to know why. Instead, he clenched his teeth and glared at me with a bitter expression.
It's because you keep getting ahead of me and getting promoted.
What?
The worst part is that my wife is doing better than me. Why are you so successful while I'm stuck here like this? You wouldn't get it, but I've been hung up on not passing the exam this whole time. Watching you succeed just makes me more and more furious.
It turns out Kyle hadn't been able to let go of the fact that he hadn't passed the civil service exam. Worse, he'd started resenting me, despite the fact I'd been a public servant long before I met him. He admitted that seeing my smooth career progression made him sick. While he was struggling in the private sector, I had a stable career, and he'd been using gambling and reckless spending to cope with his feelings of inferiority. Kyle's resentment toward me began affecting his workplace behavior, causing more friction with others around him. As his complaints about me continued, it became clear that his reasons for losing his job were nothing like what he'd told me.
My boss was just like you, never understood me. He even wanted to demote me and cut my pay. It was terrible.
What? I thought you quit because things didn't work out with your boss.
Kyle had told me he'd left because he couldn't get along with his supervisor, but the truth was different. He glared at me, clearly annoyed at having to explain. Apparently, things at work started going downhill. He repeatedly acted against people he had authority over, such as subordinates and newer employees. This behavior caused enough issues that his boss tried to discipline him. Kyle, in turn, blew up at his boss. Despite his boss's attempts to support him, he became more entrenched, vocally asserting his rights and interspersing his speech with harsh language.
The manager's the one at fault. He kept sending me to client sites even though I said no, and all the team members they gave me were useless. I was just trying to teach them by giving them work, so why am I the one getting punished?
With issues cropping up, disciplinary action is unavoidable. But the company wants to give you another chance. With that kind of language, this discussion isn't going anywhere.
I don't need a chance. You people don't get it. You wouldn't be able to do anything without me.
If he'd been in the right, that would have been one thing, but Kyle had been behaving so arrogantly that one of his team members had reported mental distress, leading to the issue being exposed. When questioned by his supervisors, Kyle seemed almost relieved that this was his way out, adopting a defiant attitude. In the end, he decided he was done and abruptly quit. Once jobless, Kyle initially helped with household chores, but his jealousy soon soured his attitude, and he abandoned them altogether. Eventually, he began secretly going to the casino every day. One night, while visiting a certain establishment, Kyle met a woman who treated him kindly with a fee. Infatuated, he started spending more and more money on her. When he ran out of his own money, he'd sneak cash out of my wallet to go seeing her. This became his new routine.
It's all because you had to be more successful than me. If you weren't around, I wouldn't be in this mess.
He tried to pin the blame entirely on me. After hearing everything, I realized this was beyond what I could handle alone, so I contacted his parents for advice. Even though it was a family issue, stealing is still stealing. I explained that I was even considering to contact the police, and his parents rushed over in a panic. They apologized profusely and pleaded with me.
Please, don't call the police.
Kyle's parents, with him still scowling, scolded Kyle. Then, they apologized, leaving me even more conflicted. His parents had always been there for us and had continued encouraging Kyle to find work ever since he lost his job. I decided not to file a report, out of respect for his parents. Instead, I told Kyle,
I can't stay with you anymore.
and asked for a divorce. Perhaps sensing that I held the upper hand with the unfiled theft report, Kyle reluctantly agreed. I suspect deep down he was actually glad to be rid of me, the source of his jealousy, though. I demanded not only alimony but also repayment for the amount he had stolen. Naturally, Kyle was left with almost no assets, but we finalized the divorce. After that, his parents tried to help him by finding him jobs, but he kept quitting for one reason or another. In less than a few years, they finally declared they could no longer support him and cut ties. Back to being single, I threw myself into my work and climbed further up the career ladder, eventually earning another promotion. A few months later, I got an unexpected call from my ex-husband. In a pitiful voice, he told me he was in trouble because he had no money. Despite being unemployed, he had continued visiting nightclubs, eventually piling up debts. He claimed,
"Some dangerous people are after me for repayment, and they've got their eyes on me. Please help me by covering the debt."
it was clearly his own fault. I had no obligation to be involved with his debt-ridden life. I simply replied,
I don't know you.
hung up, and immediately blocked his number. According to mutual acquaintances, Kyle was later caught by the scary people after his debt and was introduced to a high-paying job to work off what he owed. I heard the position came with strict supervision and demanding hours, but maybe it was exactly what someone as lazy as him needed. His parents, grieved, had come to accept this destiny, recognizing it as the path Kyle had chosen for himself. I continue to have a good relationship with his parents. Perhaps someday, I hope he might turn his life around and find a stable job. With the massive debt he'd accumulated, it would be a long time before that happened.